two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula Podcast with James Blatch and Mark Dawson, your hosts. And Mark, we're getting ready, we're packing our bags. We are off to Nink in Florida. In fact, as we record this, I'm off in 48 hours or so, and then you're going to follow on, I think. I think you're going to Boston first, aren't you? You said you're going to see BookBub.
Yeah, I go a week today. So I fly on Monday, about 5 o'clock Monday in a week. I go to Boston, watch Monday Night Football, and then I will be can't speak today. I'll be at BookBub's office on Tuesday, and then going to Florida after that.
Are you going to a football game?
No, I'm going to find a bar somewhere.
You're going all the way to America to watch NFL in a bar?
That's pretty much the size of it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, we should go to an NFL game. We've been to a ball game, baseball game. We should go to an NFL game. I'd be up for that. Even though I love NFL. That's my sport. It's a slightly ludicrous sport, and then they stop and start, and then they keep changing the players in the middle of the game. I mean, there's a guy last night retired from his entire career in the middle of the game.
Do you know his name?
I don't know his name.
Vontae Davis. Used to play for the Dolphins, cornerback. Plays for the Indianapolis Colts, or used to.
Do they call them QBs?
CBs, cornerbacks.
CB?
He's a cornerback.
Cornerback. Oh, not quarterback. Okay. Well, I quite
Sorry,
like...
American friends. This is...
I liked his style.
This is painful.
I liked his style of retiring. I mean, I've heard occasionally a player walks out in a strop in the middle of the game, but he actually retired. Yeah. Midway, he's gone.
I'm gone.
I'm done. My career.
I can't work with these people.
It was a slightly odd thing because it's quite a big decision that lasts a long time, and you could perhaps think about it before the game rather than. But anyway,
it's a bit strange. Yes,
it was a bit strange. Now I do know something about American football because I brought my son back a T-shirt for the Dallas Cowboys. And I learnt don't tell me, the quarterback's name is something's not Peyton, that's another guy. It's, what was his name? Dak
Prescott.
Dak Prescott, that's it. Yes, Dak Prescott. And I think he's from New Orleans or something. Anyway, I can't remember anything more than that. But he's a bit of a superhero in NFL times, isn't he?
He's pretty good. He played well last night.
Why don't the Cowboys win anything? Okay, well, talking of sports, the greatest sport in the world is obviously cricket, but I can't talk to any American friends because it's bewildering. If it's bewildering to 92% of British people, let alone foreigners. But our friend Ernie Dempsey, who we met in the flesh, our hero of SPF times, who was a very early taker of your course, and it turned his career from being a school teacher in a job he wasn't particularly happy with to somebody who's bought his father a house through his writing. It's been an absolutely fantastic journey. We've all the journey would, and we've loved Ernie's story, and we loved meeting him. But he's a big soccer fan, so he supports Atlanta. And of course, I've told him if you're supporting soccer, you need to really get into one of the big UK teams, one of the big British teams. So I have got him a Cambridge United shirt. This is an official away shirt for Cambridge United, and there we go. Look, watch this.
So I should say, for those, the majority of our audience who are listening to the podcast, as James always forgets, he's sporting what can only be described as the most hideous football shirt I think I've ever seen. It's a kind of a black with yellow outfit.
Black and amber, please. Black and amber army.
And amber with some cats on it. And Ernie's name on the back with Hill. I'm not quite sure who Hill is.
Kinnard Hill are solicitors, I think, in Cambridge. And Mick George is a skip hire company. That's how glamorous it is at Cambridge. But anyway, they're my beloved team, and I've been a supporter since I was in my teens. I'm a season ticket holder now, and I go with my boy who's 12 years old, and he proudly wears his Cambridge shirts. And now Ernie Dempsey's going to join us. He'll join us at the game. So I'm going to give him this shirt. It's a surprise, but if he sees the podcast, it will be ruined.
I hope you're going to wash it.
Yeah, I'm going to wash it. Well,
no, you're not.
I'm only briefly wearing it now, and it's not sweaty.
Exactly. He's not going to wash it.
He might wash it.
Sorry, Ernie. I apologise on James's behalf.
But look, this is what happens if you get to meet us in Florida, which brings me on to, you should come and meet us in Florida. So we're going to be at the Sharktooth Tavern on Gulf Boulevard. It's part of the Tradewinds Resort in St. Pete Beach, just down from Clearwater near Tampa in Florida, in the USA. And we're going to be there from, early evening till late with the SPF credit card being abused behind the bar. We'd love you to come and say hello. We'd love to buy you a drink, and we may even be handing out some pins. Mark may personally stick a pin into you to welcome you to the evening. If it's towards the end of the evening, getting a pin from us could be quite dangerous.
Dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it.
I wouldn't. Okay, look, that's it. So for our plugs for Nink, we'd love to see you. But if you can't make it, there will be some other occasions. I'll be in 20 Books Vegas later in the year, and we always try and make sure we do something in London in April, and who knows, we may do an SPF live event one day. We've always thrown that idea around, haven't we? Who knows whether that's going to happen or not. Right, now, talking of events and things, this is a terrible link because it's not remotely related, so this is why I don't work in radio anymore. Let's talk about today's interviewees. Now, they are a couple who run a small indie publishing outfit from their home, and they have grown up very similar to Michael Anderle, who wrote and published his own books and then started to publish other people's books. And we've had Jasper Joffe of Joffe Books on this podcast before, who works in London, in Shoreditch, and he publishes other people's books. And they effectively are a publisher, but they work in a much more indie type way, so very savvy on the sorts of things that you and Joe and Nick talk about a lot, of how to discover your audience, how to get visibility, and how to make money as an indie author. And although I can't remember in this interview whether they share their exact figures, but you have a way of looking at what people are doing in terms of business, and our estimate is that these people with these small little industries are going great guns.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a rough idea what people like Jasper, how he's doing, and it's I'd be very surprised if it wasn't 6 figures a month. So yeah, I've been doing tremendous business. Yeah,
and it's the reason I got really excited talking to Jasper is it really felt like we talk about the industry changing a lot, but some areas that's been slower, and the traditional industry, and some people are very good about indies, but a lot of them kind of ignore it and still look down on the indie world growing and ignore the facts that it's a good way to make money for writers. And yet this is irrefutable. If this is these little growth of small businesses that are turning over millions of dollars a year publishing other indie authors' books, it's the irrefutable evidence that publishing model of the past is not going to work in the future. It's going to be different, and there could be, who knows, the model might be 1,000 small publishers doing most of the business around the planet. So that's an introduction to them. Let's hear their story. Let's hear what sort of books they're after, and you might even want to submit your book to them after you've heard this interview. Let's hear from James and Jeanette Hunter. Right, James and Jeanette, double heading. Welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. It's always a little bit. Hi. There's always a little bit of technical at the beginning of an interview when there's two people, but it's been remarkably quick. And here we are. We can hear and see each other, and we're talking. So, I think we should start really by hearing your story. Now, I've read the notes that you've given me, but let's hear it from whoever, either James or Jeanette, wants to take the lead in telling us how this all started in publishing for you.
He's the storyteller.
Yeah, well, it's part of it. She does a fair bit too, but yeah, I had written sort of on and off for a lot of my life, and I was in the Marine Corps, and that's where I kind of got my start writing. But then it kind of fell off for me for a while, and we were living in Thailand in 2014. We were doing international aid work over there, and we were really poor. She had left. She's a chemist, but she had left her job at a big pharma company for us to go over there and live in this little concrete shack in this Thai Chinese area of Bangkok. And there was nothing to do, so I started writing because there's no TV, there's nothing else for me to do. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna go pick up writing again. And I had finished my first book, and I thought about going the traditional publishing route, and that just seemed like a terrible model for me. I was like, man, this is so slow and inefficient and terrible. And so I kind of stumbled upon self-publishing, and I didn't have big aspirations, but I thought this could work. And so I talked with her about it. And again, we were ridiculously poor. We spent our first several months in Bangkok just sleeping on floors. We didn't have we didn't have furniture. We didn't have a couch. We didn't even have filtered water for a long time. But I said, hey, I think we can do this, but it's going to take some money. And she was on board 100%. And she said, okay, let's start saving up. So we saved up for probably 6 months until we had enough to get a cover and afford editing and do all those types of things. And I came up with a marketing plan, and we launched my first book in January of 2015, kind of fingers crossed, hoping that we would make our money back in a year. And we made our money back in a couple of weeks, and that was just like flabbergasted, like, wow, what is this that's going on here? And at the time, we were still there, and we didn't really think it was going to be a business. I kept writing because I started getting fan letters saying, like, when's the next book coming out? And I was like, there's not a next book. But I was like, well, I guess I should. We were using the money to pay off some student debt. And then when did we come home?
Late 2015.
Late 2015. I had published like 2, maybe 3 books, and her father got sick, and we had to come back home and take care of him. And but we effectively lost our jobs, and she was about 7 months pregnant with our second kid. So we were homeless, moving international with a 2.5-year-old and a 7-month pregnant wife with no jobs. We're like, what are we going to do?
It was a really good choice.
It was a good choice. We made the right decision. We're like, well, we got this writing thing going on. I guess we'll just double down on that and see if we can not be homeless. And that worked out surprisingly well. So we just kind of decided we're going to go full tilt in on this thing, and spent 2016 mostly working on it by myself. And then I think it was in the beginning of 2017, we were starting to see some pretty good money. And Jeanette said, she's always been really entrepreneurial, and she said, I really want to be more involved. So she started taking over the marketing stuff.
It's been a little over a year.
And she's a way better marketer than I ever was. I was always, my attention was always divided. And since she came on board full time and started doing all of the marketing and more of the business side of stuff, that's freed me up to write. And our business has just exploded since then. And we've managed to make something pretty cool, I think. It's been a good experience for us.
Okay, well, I've got a load of questions as a result of that, and then we'll move forward, I think, into your current guise in publishing other people as well, right?
Sure.
Okay, so let me just wind back a little bit. I mean, you say you were bored and there was nothing else to do, so you wrote, but most authors will say that they always wanted to write, or they'd done stories as a student. Was there anything in your background there?
Not really. I kind of...
Yeah, you always wrote.
I kind of wrote a little bit, some short stories on and off in high school. I never thought I was going to be like an author. And then I started writing a little bit more seriously when I was in the Marine Corps. I deployed a whole bunch of times. I was with a special operations group, the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. And my first deployment was to Al Anbar, Iraq. And I was a convoy machine gunner. And when I was not on the road, I read books, but then I ran out of books, and we were living in a condemned Iraqi squad bay, so I didn't have any more things to do, and so the boredom got a hold of me once again, and I had my computer. I said, I'm going to start writing some stories. I read all these books. I think I could do some stories, and that's kind of where the writing bug got me. That was about 2007.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for putting yourself in harm's way, by the way, while the rest of us were comfortable back home. We do need... there's an old saying about we need rough men in the night who go and do that, keep us safe. But there you go, you're a rough man. So you started writing and had been a little bit there. What's the genre?
So I started just... When I initially started writing, it was just kind of generic sci-fi, fantasy, short stories. And then my first... real effort at writing a book that is the book that we ended up publishing was urban fantasy, sort of a kind of tough guy, shoot 'em up, car chases, action adventure, urban fantasy. It's sort of a thriller with monsters and guns and car chases. That's it.
So drawing a little bit on the military background, because I wondered if it, how
that's right. Actually, that's been a pretty big part of probably all of my books is bringing in the Marine Corps and some of those experiences.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool, why not? Okay, so this is what interests me from what you said, is that you looked at the traditional publishing model and thought, nah, this is not going to work, we need something else, and you found self-publishing. Now, most people don't do that. Most people see traditional publishing, get excited about the offer of 25,000 advance or 50,000 advance or something, if it's even tantalizingly close to them, and they pursue this. And then at that period have eventually thought, well, let me try self-publishing. And now we all know actually what the right route is from the beginning, and that's beginning to have an effect. But what was it about you that put you so far ahead of the game at that point and said, nah, this is not for me?
What do you think?
He's really impatient. So he started submitting all of these, queries and looking for agents and looking into the process, and he wasn't hearing back. And then, like, I don't know how many months later, he started getting rejection letters, and he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's going to take me a year to even find an agent. And so he started looking into other routes. But I think it was the biggest thing was that he was impatient.
Terribly impatient. I don't do well
He's
with
like,
waiting.
this is stupid.
This is dumb. Is there a different way that's less dumb? And there was, as it turned out.
It's a good trait.
Actually, it was David Gaughran's book, Let's Get Digital. I think that was the first one that I stumbled upon.
Yeah.
And I remember reading through some of the testimonials, and I was like, no way is this for real. Like, no way is this a thing that's happening. And so, but that was kind of my entrance to the rabbit hole, and I started going a little bit deeper. And I think I read Write, Publish, Repeat was probably the next one that I read.
Yep.
And then I just kind of made my way through the list, and I discovered Joanna Penn and Mark Dawson, and just everyone, and just started reading and learning and figuring out, is this a thing that we could do? Like, for real, if we had some money and we took this seriously?
Really extensively.
Yeah. Okay. So you got the book written. You didn't go the trad route, but you didn't know a whole lot about self-publishing at this stage. So what did you do about things like editing and cover design?
Oh boy, it was the editing especially at first was tough. I got pretty lucky, and that we found a pretty good cover designer right off the bat. And we spent a lot of money on a cover, but I figured if I'm going to do it, I need to have a cover that's comparable to what's coming out. Finding an editor was a lot trickier, and I ended up finding an editor through just like a writing forum group that I was a part of. And I didn't know any better, and that we spent a lot of money for a really poorly edited book. But at the time, we didn't know. And I actually went through 3 editors who were not very good, and spent quite a bit of money before we finally found an editor who we've had since then that we just love. But that was more sort of trial and error, just spending money, fingers crossed, looking at testimonials, hoping it would be good. And we got burned a lot before we found someone who actually worked.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me as well, that when you first start writing, and I'm in that position now, I'm not sure I feel confident enough to know what good editing looks like, because I haven't written successful books to this point, although of course I read books. But you've come out fully formed as a self-publishing author with some nous about you of understanding who's, rejecting editors who aren't quite up to you. You've got high standards. I mean, I'm impressed by what I'm hearing. Basically is what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, we appreciate that.
He does have really high standards, though. A lot of it, though, was, I think in the beginning, we went through 3 editors, but that was probably over a year.
Yeah.
Our fans, our readers would come back and say, hey, I found all these errors.
Right.
And we're like, what do you mean you found errors? And we're like, oh, well, apparently the person that we hired didn't do as good of a job as we thought they did.
I mean, that was a big part of it, because for me, like I'm a pretty good self-editor, but at some point it's just like, I've done everything that I can, and anything that's still in there, I'm just going to miss it. And so, send it off to the editor. But it was that feedback from those new fans and those new relationships that we were forming, of people saying, oh man, I found 100 errors in your book. And so, well, obviously they did a bad job. We better get somebody else to re-edit it. And just kind of working through that process while also writing new books. And eventually we found someone that was good. But yeah, it was sort of a work in process from the beginning, that like, nope, if it's bad, we're just going to get it redone until it's right.
Okay, so you stuck your book out there at the beginning, and you say it turned a profit almost instantly. So what marketing had you done to launch?
Early on, I had a really small mailing list that I had built up by doing a bunch of like freebie promotional giveaway stuff for some short stories and book launch stuff through like library things. Library things will allow you to run some free promotions and do like early readers, and you can do giveaways. And so I remember setting up a giveaway for the book then through the library things, and that netted me actually a pretty good result.
But tons and tons of reviewers as well, book bloggers, reviewers. So
I made a bunch of book flyers, like digital book flyers with just like the cover and book information and genre and word count and all of these all of this stuff. And then basically I scoured the web for about 3 months, finding every book blogger that I could possibly find that reviewed in my genre, and I contacted all of them. And I just like really professionally and said, hey, I'm a new author, and I understand if you don't want to work with me, but I have this great book, and here's my cover, and here's my blurb, and I'd be happy to provide you a digital ARC in whatever format you need. And I would say about 50% of the people we approached turned us down, but the other 50% said, yeah, absolutely, send over the book, and that actually got us a really good response early on as well. It was really time intensive because I just had to send out so many emails and constantly be following up. But I think that was probably one of the biggest things early on when I had no mailing list and no real platform and no readers.
And then on launch, we actually utilized some, promotional sites and whatnot. Our launch now is very different than what it was then. Yeah.
Okay, so you got some pretty good visibility just by basically scratching around and seeing multifaceted channels, which is something. We'll move on to where we are now. I'm guessing this has become a slightly more smoother process for you, and you've worked out what's working. I mean, that's actually one of the questions. Let's save that and remind me to ask you at the end is how much has changed in terms of what worked in 2015 and how you're finding it in all these years later in 2018. So let's move up to date a little bit. How many books have you written now? Sorry, you need a drink.
I think 18, is where we're at, is 18. And then we have plans for about another 5 to release this year, hopefully.
Are you talking our whole publishing or just
No, just me and my co-author books that I've done is about 18 books. And
You're prolific.
14 individual, just me titles, I think, and then we have several. Maybe I always get the numbers wrong, but yeah,
it's 12 and 6 or something.
18
because he has a few co-authored
18 total
as well.
Books is what we've done since January of 2015, and we're hoping to get that number up into the 20s this year, and then maybe the 30s next year. So yeah, it's been that part of it has been just a lot of work, just really button chair, putting words on the page, just constantly.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the writing because that's something everyone's always interested in before we move on to the rest of the marketing. All one series or multiple series or?
Multiple series. All of them are fantasy based, but multiple series across multiple sort of fantasy genres. So I have everything from sort of more high fantasy to lit RPG to urban fantasy, and just kind of spread out across the market. And we've had pretty good success in just about everything that we've done. I mean, we have had books that have flopped relative to how we expected that they would do. But mostly our books across, even performing across different genres, have all done really, really well. And so we're kind of all over the board. I haven't done any sci-fi. I want to do some sci-fi, but that's kind of stick with what you know, with what's working for now at least. There's
got to be some Space Marines coming into this at some point.
Oh, yeah.
So we actually have a series that we published through another author that has Space Marines.
Yeah, it's true. I have a series on the back burner called Galaxy Mercs that I really want to do. It's outlined in about the first 5 or 6 chapters are done, but just so many. You kind of have to stick with the projects that pay the bills, and then you can kind of give yourself leeway to do fun, good for your soul sort of art writing projects that you're not 100% sure whether they're going to perform well or not, but you just want to write them. So it's kind of a touch and go with that.
And James, your process, do you plot? Do you just sit down and start writing? And how and where do you write?
So initially when I started writing, I was a pantser. I didn't do any plotting at all. And that was terribly inefficient for me. And I would write the book really quick, but then I would spend ages editing the book because there would be all of these plot holes and there would be these threads that went nowhere. And at some point, I think it was when we moved back home, and it was like, this needs to be like a job. I was like, I need to find a better way to do this where I'm spending less time editing. And so initially I was like, no way can I outline, but I read a bunch of books on outlining, and I said, I'm really going to give this the good old college try, as we say here. And it really revolutionized my process and made the writing a lot quicker. The outlining is pretty intense. I usually my outlines range from usually about 8,000 to 12,000 words. So it's like beat by beat, scene by scene. The whole story is done before I ever start writing the book. And then usually I'll write it in chunks. I'll write basically a quarter of the book, and then I'll send it to Jeanette, who will read it and do developmental editing on it, and she'll send it back to me while I'm working on part 2. And so we'll sort of developmentally edit the book in process as we go, so that by the time that we're done with the book, it's clean, it's ready to go to our content editor, and then from there it'll go right out to market.
And in terms of how you learn to write, how you learn your story arcs and cause and effect and character development, is this all self-taught?
Yep. I mean, I watched a lot of movies, and I've read a lot of books, especially once I decided that I wanted to take this more seriously. I just said, hey, if this is going to be my job, I need to be better at my job than I am. I mean, my first book was good, but all of my subsequent books are a lot better than that, because once I decided this could be a thing for me, I went out and, Joseph Campbell's, Hero with a Thousand Faces, and just anything that I could find on story structure or on plotting or on character arcs, or, I mean, most of the books out there on those things I've read at some point and tried to take away the gems and see what is going to help with my process and make better stories.
Yeah,
ultimately.
one of his super strong suits, and I think one of the reasons that we've been successful, both of us, is that we're not afraid of studying and reading and looking at what other people are doing and really trying to expand our knowledge and implementing things if we think that it will benefit us. So
yeah, and that's one of the things that I really love about what Jeanette has done too. On the marketing side of things, is just like being willing to say, hey, there are people that are better at this than I am, and I'm going to go learn what those people are doing or figure out what they're doing so that I can get up to their level. And that's something I've always done with the writing, but she's really done that, especially on the even the editing side, which was a thing that she hadn't been into before, but on the editing and the marketing side, and it's really shown. I mean, she's grown a lot.
Yeah, that's a really important trait, and it does. We see a lot of this, of course, and it sets people apart. The ones who say, I don't need any help and you can't teach me anything, and the ones who are all over anything you've got to say. I think that's a very important sort of mental state to have, mindset. So Jeanette, let's talk about you a little bit. So first of all, I'm intrigued by the fact that 5 years ago you're a military wife, husband presumably away quite a lot, and we know that's a very tough thing. So we thank you as well for your part in that. Did you have any inkling at that point that you'd be sitting here in this publishing partnership with your husband a few years later?
No. So, but he remembers the story a little bit different than me, because when he got out of the Marine Corps in 2010, I remember he wrote another novel prior to the one that was published. And I was reading it, and I walked into his office and I said, hey, you're going to be published one day. This is really good. And of course, that book is never going to be published. But I do remember saying that to him, and I never thought that I would be along for the ride. But I always saw his skills and abilities and thought he could totally do this. So, and now here we are.
But that was a sort of fanciful thing, I guess. And here you are as this partnership, and it is genuinely a partnership. I can tell from a few things that James has said that you are a key part of this business. So you've picked this up. Do you have a background in marketing or business?
I've got some background in marketing. Like he said, I'm a chemist, so that's like my actual profession. But I've studied a little bit of business, a little bit of marketing on the side as well. My father ran his own business, so kind of had that entrepreneurial
gene
or drive or whatever to do things on my own. So
well, it's coming to its own now. So in terms of marketing, what has developed in terms of James's books, first of all, before we talk about widening your enterprise, what has developed in the way that you market now? What's working for you now?
Well, people always ask us about Facebook and Amazon and all of those things. And honestly, we didn't start running ads until a year ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Just under a year ago when I took over. I mean, we'd done a few things here or there, but hadn't really, done a lot in there. And so our whole business before that had all been, organically grown through the way that we discussed earlier with promotions and reaching out to bloggers and all of those things.
And also just because whenever anybody asks me what's the best thing that they can do in terms of marketing, it's write more books faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
and mailing list. From the very beginning, we've always known that a mailing list was very important.
We had started our mailing list even with just from the first book, but our biggest growth initially was just by writing books and releasing good content consistently.
Because at that point, I was doing some editing and running our finances, taxes and all of that, but he was running the business completely. So, yeah, and then we took over.
And at some point, you decided to start taking on other authors.
Yep, that was probably a year and a half ago.
What prompted that?
So one of my co-authors now, Eden Hudson, who we just adore and love, I had been working with her.
She was a beta reader.
She was a writer, but her and I had sort of a writer relationship where she would beta read some of my books and I would beta read her books, and she's just a phenomenally good writer. But she hadn't had a lot of financial success self-publishing, and then she had a new series that was coming out, and I read it and I was like, man, this is so good. This is really good, and we were doing really well at that point, and we had a sort of a surplus in terms of like business money, and it was like we can afford to get nice covers for these, and we can afford a marketing budget, and we can afford to do a lot of this stuff that I know that she doesn't really want to do because she's more of she's just more on the writer side of things than the publishing side of things. And so we made her an offer on the books, even knowing that they were off genre, they were a little bit wonky. Amazing books, but in terms of just marketing, a little off genre, not really fitting cleanly into the box. But
at that point, though, we were doing it because we had the money and we wanted to
just help
out.
Yeah,
because we really liked her. I don't think at that point had this vision.
No. That's how we got into it. Yeah. Publishing other people is just wanting to help this one friend of ours who had this great series that was a little bit outside the genre box that we thought, we should take a crack at this and see what we could do, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah.
And you said that you made her an offer, and I know obviously deals between you and authors are going to remain, you probably want them to remain confidential, but can you give us an idea of the model that you use compared to what the traditional industry would do?
I just tell you what we do. So, it is a little bit different with every author that we do.
And it's different now than it was then.
And it's different now than it was then. But generally, we do like a in advance.
Very small.
A small advance, but just kind of a good faith offering. Like, hey, we believe in you, and we only make money if we sell books. So we usually do a small advance, and then we do. Usually it's 60-40 on the first 3,500 copies to help us recoup our investment, and then we split it 50-50 with the author, and that's across all titles. So if it's ebooks or audiobooks or whatever, and we pay for everything. We do everything. We do everything. We do all of the marketing. We do all the cover. We pay for the multiple editors that we have on our team now. We never do the royalty split on the audio books. We always do just straight up per finished hour, and so far, it's turned out to be a pretty good model for the authors that are working with us. Right now, we only have we have a couple of authors that are working with us, but we only have 2 that we've really published aside from me. But they've both gone on to be Amazon #1 bestsellers in their respective categories, and not like small niche categories like dark fantasy these are like big categories like dark fantasy or cyberpunk or sword and sorcery or whatever it is that we're publishing. So it's turned out to be a pretty good thing so far for the authors that have worked with us.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's a story that's increasingly common. We're hearing these small agencies. We had Jasper Joffrey on this podcast. We're speaking to other people at the moment. Mark and I are really keen on this as well because we have a big community of authors, and we know that there's a tragedy of lots of people who are very, very good writers but just don't either want to or just can't quite get their heads around the marketing side. And I completely understand that. Mark and I are unusually
it's hard. It's a lot of
work.
Yeah. And what a far more equitable split. I don't think the general public, my friends, have any idea how little the percentages are in traditional publishing. And I point out to them, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, the stories about Booker Prize winners who go back to their job as a solicitor because they've made no money from their writing. And it's a tragedy for writers that it's gone on for centuries like that. So I'm so excited every time I hear another little agency started up where there's an equitable split for the author. It still relies on key things, the books being good and the marketing being on point, but that's a really competition will sort that out, and the agencies that don't work, and the authors that can't write or haven't adapted their writing to be better. But that's all okay, right? And it's an exciting field to be in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I am seeing this a lot more, just where these successful indies who already have, like, because once you've already developed those skills, once you know how to market and sell books, it's easier to build those audiences, even for authors that are not you. That's one of the things that I think is...
you have to have the skill.
But you have to have the skill set. I mean, that's one of the things I think that has just been so huge for us, is like, now with the skills that we have, and part of it's with our platform and the reach and the mailing lists and all of these things, but in some ways it's harder for us to fail than it is for us to succeed. That doesn't mean we can't fail. We have still had projects that didn't do as well as we wanted them to do. Yeah. But like, now there's sort of a reader bias in our favor instead of a reader bias against us, where we already have this inbuilt audience of people who trust the kind of books that we put out. So if we put out a book, even if it's not by me, they say, well, James Hunter writes books like these and he likes books like these, and I like the kinds of things that he likes, so I'm probably going to like this, and they're going to pick it up and buy it.
And in terms of your mailing list, you had your author mailing list. You've now got your publishing house, if we call it that, mailing list. Is that the same list, or have you compartmentalized? Or
no, I always laugh when I was watching Mark's course, because he shows, this giant list of all of his different lists, and that's totally what ours is like. We have different genre lists, we have different mailing lists for things that are specific for him, that people signed up for his mailing list. We have our Shadow Alley Press mailing list. We have lots of segmented things so that we can make sure to send people what they want.
Okay, but sounds like a lot to manage in terms of that. And then I'm quite interested in who the author who comes to you, who may or may not have the semblance of a mailing list, you're effectively building up a mailing list for that author, but that's something that you own rather than they own, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, that's one of the benefits of working with us, but it's sort of a double-edged sword in the sense that, I mean, we will always, like, if an author has a mailing list and wants to put links to their mailing list in the back of their book, we're totally fine with that. But in terms of, like, promoting a mailing list, like when we're promoting a mailing list, we're almost always promoting the Shadow Alley Press mailing list, because that's something that we can control and is a big tool that we help not just that author, but all of the authors that we work with. And that is one of the benefits that they get, is they get access to our list of readers, which is pretty substantial, and generally is an engaged audience, because we don't do a lot of like mailing list blasts for other authors or things like that. It's mostly giving them specifically the content that they have told us they want. If they're audiobook listeners, great. We will message you only about audiobooks. If that's the thing that you're into, that's the thing that you're going to get.
Yeah. What platform do you use for the mailing list? You still MailChimp by the sounds of it? You've got separate lists?
No, we use MailerLite.
I use MailerLite. Okay, good. We're adding that to our 101 course. It's such a popular platform that's risen in the last 12, 18 months or so. Okay, so I suppose the one thing I was thinking about this the other day that's missing at the moment, and I know there are companies around trying to bridge this gap, is organisations like yours and Michael Anderle's and Jasper Joffe's and so on, getting books into bookshops. Because really you're looking after well-read authors, you're a well-read author, and it's slightly ridiculous that somebody who hears about you who's completely, because they're a reader, agnostic to everything, walks into Barnes & Noble or Waterstones in the UK and says, can I have a James Hunter book? And they shrug their shoulder and say, well, who's he published with? And there's a stupid behind-the-scenes demarcation between the two. And I wonder, I know we've had a couple of people approach us, say that their job is to get books into bookshops, and we're just doing our due diligence at the moment, because there's also a few companies in there who perhaps just take some money off you for what looks like that. But this seems to me like an area that needs developing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we could do anything. So it is really frustrating, because there's a whole segment of readers that are not exposed to my books that I think would like my books, because they predominantly shop in physical bookstores, or they're paperback book readers. And obviously we have our books in paperback that you can order on Amazon, but it's not quite the same thing. So that's one of the very frustrating things for me. I'm working with and agent Paul Stevens out of the Donald Moss Literary Agency. Well, we're tentatively going to be working together. We have our agreement drafted, but it hasn't been signed, to try to pitch a new fantasy series that would probably be a loss leader for us in terms of actual revenue that we make, but that would get us access to a new reader pool that we don't currently have. Because we've looked at it. We've looked at the Booksellers Association, and how could we do this? Because it's not just that, because we have enough money to do, a 5,000 or 6,000 book print run on some of our more popular titles, but how do we distribute them? How do we get them into bookstores? We don't have reps. We don't have seller. I mean, that's the one thing that the traditional publishers have, is they have this giant network of representatives that can go into every bookstore, and they can go into libraries, and they can go into indie bookstores, and they can just, and that's the one thing that they do really well that I have not seen in indie. I mean, you can go to your local Barnes & Noble and say, hey, I'm a local, put my book on your shelves, and they might, but getting national or international distribution.
Yeah, it comes to the point where you think, from a marketing or advertising standpoint, that the hours that you're going to have to pour in to get anything is going to your return is going to be so minuscule.
Yeah, I think something must be coming this way, because I can understand the systemic problems. That's the right word. Bookshops can't deal with 100,000 individual authors or small companies, but there has to be some way of streamlining this process. And those results are probably those solutions are probably coming. Okay, so
I hope so. I was going to say, I think a big part of the problem at this point is still the return policies for most bookstores. Is for traditional published books, they can return them if they don't sell, and for most indies that just
isn't going to work.
It just isn't going to work, especially if you're doing print on demand, that kind of thing. So
yeah, the old remaindered pile. So yes, indeed, we'll have to get over that. So let's talk about where you are now, and there will be, of course, authors listening to this saying, publish me. So how are you looking for new authors? How do people go about contacting you? Maybe you're not looking.
We're pretty selective on the people that we work with. We have a must meet and like you policy, if that makes sense.
That's the biggest.
We don't just take open submissions, but we did have an open submission call for an anthology that we're putting together. That's closed now, but we'll probably do that again in the future. So if there are submissions open, you'll be able to find information on our Facebook page, on our website, things like that.
Yeah, one of the things that we decided on early on that we wanted to do differently than a lot of the small presses that have been out there for a while is we are not interested in publishing 100 authors. We are interested in publishing 10 authors, because when you have that many authors, unless you have a giant staff, it's really hard to give the authors the attention that you need for their books to be successful, because marketing books it's really time intensive. So our goal early on was to find authors that we want to work with, and then not just publish a book or a series, but partner with them as authors and help them develop a sustainable brand that's going to be lucrative for them and lucrative for us. So our goal is not just, hey, send us a book and maybe we'll publish it. It's, hey, we want to develop a relationship with you as a person, and if we like you and you're easy to work with and you can hit your deadlines and you're flexible and coachable, then we will help work with you to build a sustainable living, hopefully, as an author. And that's really more of our goal. So it's a little bit different than the really widespread, as many authors as you can get, putting out as many books as you can. That's not really our model.
Yeah, and managing growth is a really important thing to do for new businesses, and we know that overextending yourself can be the death of a business. But hey, look, you guys have done well. I think you shared some figures with me in the notes, looking at potentially $500,000 of revenue this year.
Yeah.
I'll let her speak to that. She's more of the numbers person.
I just calculated our second quarter, actually third quarter. We don't have all the final figures in for third quarter yet, because audio is only a month, behind. But we'll have another 6-figure quarter for third quarter. So I think that the fourth quarter will have to have a really good quarter. But we've had quite a few really hot best-selling releases that just came out.
Yep, and we have a lot of those, a lot of follow-up books in the chute that are ready to go, ready to drop. So I think that it's
audio. We've got a ton of audio that's getting ready to come to market. So
either way, mid six figures this year, one way or another, and
absolutely.
And you're growing, so you're looking at 7 figures next year.
That
Fingers
would be
crossed.
amazing.
Yeah,
and really, I think the thing that I'm most excited about, because we're pretty simple people, actually. Like we are a 1-car household.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2015 microvan. It's not even a minivan. It's a teeny little thing that like we're not.
I think he wants a new car, Jeanette.
Fancy people.
No, he's the one that wants to keep it.
I'm the one that she's been fighting for the new car.
I'm like, we're making how much?
This is a fine vehicle to get us from point A to point B. So we're not, we don't have like really high taste. So I think the thing that's been exciting for me is that money allows us to finance new projects, and that a big chunk of that money is getting paid out now. It's royalties to authors that we're working with, because I think we're helpers by nature, and so the thing that's really exciting for me is that we can, being a writer full-time is the coolest job on the planet. So knowing that we are getting to make that dream a reality for other people, that's the thing that's just blowing my mind, and is so exciting and so cool. So I'm really hoping that next year we'll be able to make that a reality for even more people. And
we have one of our writers, Aaron Crash. He's been writing for like 11 years.
Yeah.
And has never really had, financial success with it. Has always done it because he loved to do it. And he's just doing really, really well with us, and just we're just thrilled that we get to help him on that journey. So
that's great, and it sort of brings us full circle, because you started the story helping out others in Thailand as a couple with very little, not even a microvan between you, I'm guessing.
We didn't have a car.
We had little bicycles.
We had feet.
They're called Maybon bikes. They're grandmother bicycles, and so here I am, this 6'2" former Marine American
with a basket,
up in
a little
bag.
basket on the front, riding my Maybon bike down the streets of Bangkok. So we've come a long ways, all the way up to the microvan level of success.
Yeah. I really hope when we speak again, you may have a new car, but who knows? I don't want to push you into any kind of
we will.
rash decisions. Now, we should say, because we haven't, just to conclude this, we haven't given away the name of your company, but it's the Shadow Valley Press?
Shadow Alley Press.
Shadow Alley.
Shadow Alley
yes.
Press.
Oh, yes, I saw the W, but it's a W, not a V. Shadow Alley Press. And so people go to shadowalleypress.com to find your books and so on.
Yep.
And potentially, who knows, somebody who you might meet and like one day and end up publishing.
It's true.
Yeah, seriously, we do a lot of conventions. I'll be at Dragon Con. I'm going to be at the Quills Con in Utah in just a week from now, I think.
Yep.
And but the number one thing, if you're listening and you want to work with us, come and meet me, and don't be terrible, because our number one rule is you have to be easy to work with, and we have to like you, because if you're hard to work with, it's just going to be too much of a hassle. So come and introduce yourself and be awesome.
Well, that sounds like a terrifying prospect, to have to come and not be terrible in front of a man who's just snapped people in half in the Middle East. Or whatever it is you did there. Okay, look, thank you so much indeed for joining us. It's a really lovely ethos the two of you have as a couple that drives your company as well. So I'm full of admiration for that. I think it's really nice. And I look forward to, I don't know if you're going to 50 Books or Nink later this year, and either of those? No?
We're not going to 50 Books this year. We went last year. But we are going to try, I think we're going to try to go to Bali is our goal.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, but that's not for where readers can meet us.
No.
Yeah, Nink is, we're in the process of moving states right now, because we like to throw everything on.
Do it all at once.
I've noticed that.
I
noticed that.
You noticed that.
Oh, yeah. So Nink, we'd love to go, but haven't committed to it yet.
Okay, but people can see you around at the various conventions. So great. Look, thank you so much indeed for joining us from Colorado. All I can do is just wish you growth and success in the future, and we'd love to keep in touch and catch up with you in a little while.
Awesome. And we just want to say thank you so much for inviting us on. I mean, what you guys do is just amazing. Mark Dawson's courses have been instrumental and transformational for us in our business model. So getting the opportunity to come on and talk with you and it's been awesome. It's amazing. It's really cool. So thank you so much for having us on. It really is a pleasure and an honor. So we appreciate it.
It's been our pleasure and our honor. So thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, there are James and Jeanette. Now, you and I got very enthused about this, as you and John Dyer got very enthused about the whole idea of an indie publishing space. And I still to this day feel very strongly that you're in a really strong position to do this. And I know the big problem we've got is a time sap. Is a big time sap. But we did a trawl out for books. We got a lot of submissions from the SPF community. We've done some work in narrowing those down. We've got more work to do in trying to create a kind of model around that. But that could be a really exciting thing for SPF to get into. And I guess what we're looking for, this could be another opportunity to say that, is we're looking for somebody who's a good writer, writes books that sell in a genre that's well read, but who can't do, hasn't tried the marketing. There's no point in us taking somebody on who's been really good at the marketing, because they've probably done as best as they can, and it would be wrong of them to sign over to us. And the sort of deals that Jasper and I think James and Jeanette do is much closer to 50% than it is the traditional industries deal. So it's always going to be a good deal for an author. But I don't know, how are you feeling about it? I'm still feeling energized that this is something that should be in our future.
Well, we'll see. The problem is just time. So I've got, two businesses, both of which do quite well and both of which take up an enormous amount of my time, plus two little people I have to look after. And there's just only so much time, really. If time was no issue, I'd definitely look into doing something like that, because I think, a lot of these people, Jasper Joffe took my course. So I've taught him through the course how to do what he's doing. So I could certainly do that. It would be something I think I could do quite comfortably, but it would also, when I do things, I don't do things unless I can dedicate myself to them 100%. And at the moment, I don't think I could say that for yet another business on top of the two that I'm already involved with. So one day we'll see. I think it is something that could be quite fun, and it probably could be quite lucrative. But
okay, and we should say to the people who've submitted their books, it's not a waste of your time. It is still an active project within SPF. Oh, yeah. It's just it's not moving quite as fast as perhaps all of us would like, but it is still moving. So thank you very much for that. And now the other thing just to mention is that conference season is upon us, NINC and Vegas and all the rest of it. And what's the question I get asked by everybody we meet? What do they say to me? What's the second thing? The first thing is, how are you? How was your flight? And what's the second thing they ask?
What is it like to work with someone like Mark? That's got to be the
that's down on the list. The second question they ask me is, where's your book, dude?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And
they say dude.
They say dude, because they're American. That's how they say dude in America.
50-year-old people shouldn't use that word.
Okay, dude. All right, granddad. So I get asked, where's your book? And
where's your book, dude?
Where's your book, dude? And I have to explain. Now, things are feeling a lot more positive for me about the book, incredibly so, actually, this time around. So I do have a better answer than I did. And I have blogged this. I promised I would blog this. So people will remember we had Jenny Nash, a book coach, on the podcast. I recorded that interview at the beginning of July. And in the background, I've been connecting with Jenny and bought into the service she's offered. And I'm blogging that process so that people can understand what it is you get for your money, why it might work for me, might not work for you, might work for you, who knows. And that blog, I think, is going live on the same day that this podcast is going out. Is that correct, Mark?
That's the plan.
That is the plan. And the blog is called, Where is James Blatch's Book? I should have called it, Dude, Where's Your Book? Should we change it to Dude, Where's Your Book? That's probably...
No, let's not do that. I hate that word almost as much as I hate the word journey.
Yeah, okay. So that blog is there, and I can refer anybody who asks me, dude, where's your book, to that blog over next. So I might put the URL onto a bit of paper and hand it out. Anyway, that's not to stop you asking me where my book is, and I'm happy to talk about it. Good. Okay, look, that's it. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you to our guests today, James and Jeanette, working and publishing from their front room at home and going great guns. It's an exciting time to be a writer. There's never been a better time to be a writer, in fact. And we are going to say hello to you next week, so tune in then. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.